so let's do Madame Blavatsky with all your...
Look at those eyes. Totally piercing. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So it was fascinating to dip into her work and realize how much she is an ancestor for CIS. Like, what happened 100 years ago, like what's going on today with the fusion of just culture globally, the religious traditions, wisdom traditions, the East-West. Like, she was a major, like, pioneer in that. And she spent 20 years traveling the world, seeking out occult traditions, mystical traditions, the esoteric knowledge, and that's something that personally fascinates me too. So it was just like lots of fun to dive into it. And she did 3 main things in her life. She founded the Theosophical Society, and she wrote Isis Unveiled, Isis being nature, kind of like revealing the dynamics of nature. And her magnum opus is The Secret Doctrine. It's her masterwork. And okay, can we jump over to her birth chart? I kind of want to highlight some of her archetypal complexes. So we've got Mars, Saturn, Mercury, and mostly what I see is Saturn and Mercury. There's this element of a very disciplined mind. And so we'll enter into some of her work. I've tried to summarize it, and but you'll see there's lots of bullet points, and it's very orderly and all that. And let's see. There's that major piece. She's got Sun, Jupiter, Uranus. So she's got this sort of, her character is one. She's a maverick. She's an eccentric. She's a radical. And she's very different. She's travels the world, travels alone, travels to these exotic places, sort of seeks out these esoteric perspectives, this ancient wisdom that is sort of in opposition to sort of like the general understanding, I guess, general understanding in the West. She's also got Sun trine Pluto, this right here. So like a deep investigator into the occult. And she's got Mercury, or Venus, Moon, Pluto. So she's a powerful woman, super powerful woman. And then what's really interesting to me, and that I'm hoping that you guys can help shed some insight on, is Neptune has a minor aspect to this. And I have yet to really get into minor aspects. But to me, it seems like it's kind of, I would assume that since she's largely like working in the realms of spirituality, that Neptune would be highly aspected, but it seems to be kind of mysteriously doing its own thing.
But the birth time that we do have does give her Neptune right at the angle, very tight conjunct to the descendant. And the fact so that very much empowers that archetype, particularly in like with the one-to-one relationship which she had with these great mystical teachers, wherever she went, and then also invisible or non-incarnate teachers. That's the Neptune right at the whenever. See, you can have no major aspects with the planets. She does have a Neptune Mercury. That's the way you can see that is it goes to 755 of Virgo.
Is it this line?
Yeah, that line goes to 750. It's an exact sesqui square. So it's just a little more than 1 degree exact from Mercury to Neptune, which is like Rudolf Steiner, the Mercury-Neptune you know, she's channeling basically all this mystical information that becomes the basis for
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mystery revealed. Peeling layers. Okay. Can we go back to, yeah, let's see. So a lot of her behavior was outside of the norm, very Uranian. She's got the sun opposite Uranus and the moon trine Uranus. So Uranus is both like an aspect to her luminaries. And then what I also have is moon Uranus, and she is kind of like me, or what I have been, itinerant in the sense of just moving around a lot. And she uses this energy to travel the world, essentially, and so she remakes herself a lot. And there's this disruption in the home life, you know, like she'll move to a whole different continent and have to start over. And then there's this main piece where she works as a medium, which I saw as Venus Uranus, which was like relationships, unconventional relationships. And then it's also, like you were saying, the Mercury Neptune. And what fascinates me is that she developed these relationships with masters, these initiated adepts, which is a subject that just completely fascinates me. These humans that are initiated into the mysteries of the universe and like hold spiritual power in their bodies. And so like she met these two masters that were living in Tibet. They're Indian, but they're living in Tibet. And she made her way in there and worked with them for about 2 years. And they sort of prepared her soul, purified it, so that spiritual wisdom could come through, essentially. That stuff fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, calling that in. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So, Theosophy, Theos, the divine, Sophia, wisdom, divine wisdom. It's this tradition, this ancient tradition that has been passed down since time immemorial. She wasn't the first to like coin it. It has a long lineage, and but she created the Theosophical Society. It was this sort of like Saturnian Mars effort of like creating a structure, taking action to create structure, to like infuse this study. And I love symbols. And so we've got the Om, you know, the original vibration. We've got the swastika, which is sort of like symbolizing the dynamic nature of the cosmos. You've got the ring past knot, which is sort of like the boundary of the universe. And then you get this Ouroboros, which symbolizes the eternal cyclical nature, this regenerating evolution. And then you get the interpenetrating trinities. You get this descending, which symbolizes spirit, and you get the ascending, which symbolizes matter. And so you get spirit and matter together, and you get the Egyptian Ankh, which symbolizes life, and more specifically, eternal life. And so there's this old saying, there is no religion higher than truth, and then here it is in Sanskrit, and it sounds like Satya Nasti Parodharma. Satya Nasti Parodharma. That's what I want to talk about with the Theosophical Society. That's about to the extent that I want to pierce that. Do it in all in symbols. Okay, let's go on next. These were the two masters that she was working with. Moria and Kutumi. Mahatma means great soul. So she spent 2 years in Tibet undergoing initiation with them. And after that, then she came back to New York, and that's when she started the Theosophical Society. But what happened is, in terms of rising the Kundalini force up into these areas, she was able to have long-distance telepathic communication with them. they as adepts, in terms of magical training, are able to project their astral bodies out, and she, as a medium, is able to receive them. And so she's channeling messages from them, and also they sometimes would enter into her body and just use her hands and write. So the books that she wrote was a collaboration between her and these masters. And it's this tradition of these initiated adepts that are, kind of in the behind the scenes throughout humanity, and are holding the ancient wisdom, and bits and pieces of it just comes out, over time. These are totally humans. They're not like, when people talk about ascended masters, they're humans living in Tibet. And they look similarly, kind of like Christ, in a way. I figure, I don't know, when the yogis develop, they all kind of, there's this archetypal master that kind of emerges. Okay, let's go to the next one. So her first book was Isis Unveiled, and it sort of, from her many years of working with Eastern traditions and also various Western esoteric traditions, she was able to sort of pull out hidden principles. And so the idea is that there's no miracle. Everything happens according to law. I mean, eternal, immutable, ever active. Nature and man are both triune. There's a corporeal aspect, there's a form, there's an animating aspect, an energy, and then there is a spirit, an eternal source, that which both of these manifest from, and that is eternal. And so you get this as above, so below hermetic axiom. What's going on inside man is what's going on inside nature, is what's going on inside the cosmos. One interesting thing is mediumship is the opposite of adeptship. This is something that I'm studying. I have friends that are mediums, and so there's this idea of a medium being somebody who allows passive entities and energies to come into their body and to control them. The idea with adeptship is it's sort of like magicianship, in that you want to remain complete control of your body and the forces around you. So it's not being a passive agent. There's this other precept that all things can be known, and it's sort of this understanding that this awareness of the Akashic records, and that all thoughts, all feelings, all behaviors, all evolution is recorded universally. There's a dimension of the universe that records this. And so all past evolution is recorded, and when you develop the spiritual sense, you can tap into this and you can read this. And so a lot of where this knowledge that's coming up and later, it comes from this sort of spiritual sense. It taps beyond history. The books, they kind of drop off a couple thousand years ago. But there's people like Steiner, and before Steiner, Blavatsky, and others that are able to read this and pull this stuff out. And so that's why, all things can be known. Races differ. And, to sum up Isis Unveiled, magic is spiritual wisdom, to just completely condense down thousands of years of tradition and several years of writing into a couple words. Okay, let's go to the next one. So I made the mistake of getting this book and getting really excited and not knowing when I was going to present. So I proceeded to get a bunch of coffee and just try to read through this book as fast as I could over the process of 3 days. And my head just completely exploded. I would not recommend it. But it is interesting what's happening. Super deep stuff has to be approached slowly. it's this idea of the synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy. It's this sort of key, this masterwork. And this was published, we don't really have like the month, we have the year, under the Neptune-Pluto conjunction. And Rick has this quote from Cosmos and Psyche. The Neptune-Pluto aspects, they represent an awakening of radically new religious, philosophical, and scientific perspectives, which like directly maps onto that. I don't know if you got the quote from here or what, or if it's just all coherent, but...
I did get it from Blavatsky.
No? Gotcha, okay. One more thing before. So like, when she's in Tibet, she gets access to one of these sacred texts. It's called the Book of Dan. And it's one of the texts that remains hidden. Nobody's ever found it. And so there's this other element of like controversy. You know, a lot of this stuff, a lot of this knowledge, a lot of the methods of the science of it is just like so far out there for conventional science that you can't really exactly trace the steps from the ground level of sorts. But this whole book is basically just a commentary on that. It's an unpacking of this super archaic text, ancient wisdom, trying to make it explainable. We're going to enter into it. It might get a little weird for a bit, but hopefully we'll make it through it. And then we'll step out and we'll look at the archetypes again. So here's kind of where the book sits in, you know, time, essentially, with Neptune and Pluto. And so like this idea of the two most outer planets moving really slowly, and the fact that she's penetrating into these mysteries of humanity, lots of power there. And so you've got basically the rise and the fall of Rome, and you've got the rise and the fall of the Middle Ages, and you've got the beginning of the Renaissance. Huge swaths of time. And then so there's another quote Rick said, in the great crucible of metaphysical destruction and regeneration that Western culture passes through, that end of an age and transformative threshold which was symbolized in the subterranean dissolution of conventional Christian belief and Enlightenment assumptions, and the global interpenetration of the world's religious and spiritual traditions. So like, the work that she's doing is concomitant with basically what else is happening at the time, late 1800s. Okay, let's go next. So there's 2 volumes. The first one is Cosmogenesis. Second one is Anthropogenesis. Cosmogenesis, the creation of the cosmos, according to this old ancient wisdom tradition. And there's these fundamental propositions: an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle on which all human speculation is impossible. And yet, I find myself growing up I just can't help it. Just try to like, but that, and explain it, and you just ultimately fail. But it's such a great, inspiring opportunity to try to explain the impossible or try to penetrate it. There's this ground of being that is unknowable, essentially. Then there's this understanding of the rising of the universes and the playing out and the dissolving of them back into the ground of being. The Vedics, they call it the breath of Brahma, and so and it's an endless, eternal process of universes arising and falling and rising and falling. And when the universe dissolves back into the ground, we can't really penetrate that. And the third proposition is that each of us as a soul is in unity with the universal oversoul. So for me, this represents this was like a bit of metaphysical healing, cognitively understanding the sort of like my connection with the rest of the cosmos, like understanding it, feeling it, understanding it, which is all a part of the unknown root. And so she, in exploring the Eastern traditions, was one of the first people to bring to the West karmic law and incarnation, essentially. And so within this understanding of multiple eternal universes being born, you have this sort of reincarnating soul line that we all travel through. And it basically, it's for the whole term of the universe. So I hope to see you all next time. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Okay, so this is an attempt to try to synthesize the genesis of the cosmos into a slide, essentially. You've got that which never had a beginning and never has an end, or will never have an end. You know, eternity, the divine unity. Within that, there's a seed of potentiation. The first germ, the first seed, the dawn of differentiation, that manifests, and you have the cosmos. Potentiality manifests, transforms into a line or horizon, and that symbolizes the divine, immaculate Mother Nature, essentially, within the all-embracing absolute infinitude. And then, so there's this other element of the first perception of man connected with procreation is feminine, because man knows his mother more than his father. So hence, female deities were more sacred than the male. Nature is therefore feminine and to a degree objective and tangible. And the spirit principle, which fructifies it, is concealed. So there's a spirit principle concealed, and it is masculine, but the manifestation is feminine. So there's this metaphysical identification happening. The circle with the cross right here, this symbolizes the origin of life, the origin of humanity. And this is also, interestingly enough, the astrological symbol for Earth, which is a neat correlation. And then this right here represents the splitting of the sexes. So this whole doctrine exists within the body, like the myth of descent. You know, in Cosmos and Psyche, you've got the myth of ascent, science, and the myth of descent, that we come from divine. We are divine spirit sort of descending into matter. And the beginning descent of it, we are ethereal and androgynous, essentially. And then there is a fall and a split that happens, and that's what this represents. And now we're running around as male and female, essentially, dyads. This last one, when you remove the circle, it represents the fall into matter. And that's the cosmogenesis. You guys starting to see like a Saturnian, mercurial, like methodical, disciplined way about going about this. There's also 4 minutes? Okay. There's also this element of like the moon and Pluto, sort of like this, and it's for me it's this diving into what we are unconscious of, essentially, at the time back then. We can just go over this, and I go into each of these, but I'll just skip them. There's details of the different races.
And that's the part that's in your reading, too, that you sent out.
Great, yeah. I think this stuff is fascinating. People talk about Lemuria, people talk about Atlantis. For whatever reason, I have lots of friends that are just really interested in it. I just tend to surround myself with interesting people. Okay, let's go to the next slide. There's this other element of, in the creation of the universe and the cosmos, that elements then interweave, and that humanity also co-evolves with that. And so at the beginning, we didn't have 5 elements. We had 1 element, 1 sense, and then as it evolved, a second element emerged, and then we integrated that into our senses. And so now we have 4 elements, you know, and 5 senses. We're in the process of sort of integrating this 5th element. And there's also this other idea that there's a 6th and a 7th root race coming up and a 6th and a 7th element in this period, which fascinates me to try to speculate on. Let's skip that, skip that, skip that, skip that, skip that, skip that. Okay, let's go to her birth chart. So a lot of what I presented on, I see as sort of this right here. You know, lots of order and structure to it. And then the way she lived her life was very much like breaking out of Russian noble aristocratic society, traveling the world, and doing it in a very large way, in a very like eccentric way, and embodying that, diving into the mysteries, and like you were saying, being a channel, essentially. And yeah, that's a lot of what I was able to come up with. What comes to mind for you guys with the archetypes? Because I didn't really touch on that too much, but I wanted to kind of dive into some of her work and then illustrate some of it. Yeah.
I can't. So is the Mars, Saturn, Mercury? It's always hard for me to read on these ones. Is that a square with the Neptune?
It looks like a sesqui square.
Sesqui square.
Okay.
Just mainly to Mercury.
Right.
That's the one that's tight, just about a little more than 1 degree exact. The way you, a sesqui square would be like a trine plus another 15 degrees.
Right.
So
Right.
it's 135.
Right.
And like the semi-square, which is half of a square, so the way you calculate it is you just go 22 Capricorn to 22 Virgo, and you take 15 off more, and you're at 755, and that's how you can see it's to Mercury.
Right. Yeah, it's just interesting, the Theosophy as this. It's almost this attempt to, I mean, the Mercury Saturn, almost wanting to know and concretize, make a concretely intelligible these very transcendent, in some ways, you know, aspects of knowledge or the cosmos that are inconcretizable, that can't really fully be penetrated, can't be boxed in, but yet at the same time the attempt to bring it down and to give it structure, give it concrete, you know, symbolism, and so with the Mars, just kind of really charging the effort to actually go in and have the energy to mobilize that effort and do it is really interesting.
Yeah, and there's this other element of she receives a lot of criticism.
Right.
You know, because it's so wild, and that she just gets criticized from all sides and has to defend herself. What I'm interested in is, you know, like, I haven't really penetrated much is this element right here in terms of understanding it, like the Venus moon, you know, I understand that as like very feminine, you know, and then you get this plutonic aspect, so there's this powerful woman, that's the most that I'm able to understand it, you know, but like how does her relationships come in, maybe like relationships with masters, powerful people, like.
Well, if you look at in the biography, she, like Sylvia Cranston has a biography of hers that we used when we did or rather Robert McDermott and I did a course on Madame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and Jung. And
Sounds great.
In the biography, you really see how in her girlhood, which is a big part of her, she just, you know, she flourished as a as a girl, like as in her friendships and her playful. She tended to always hang out with the less rich people in the area.
Very sociable.
Yeah, she was very democratic in that sense. But I think you're right to point to often with Moon Pluto, he's like almost like colleague power of a person.
I see that.
And the fact that she's moving deep forces, like if we believe what many people describe happened, she could move things around the rooms without touching them. There's this very weird phenomenal quality to her and her being and her life. I mean, she is, as you say, she's the mother of us all in certain ways. I mean, Esalen, Theosophy, Anthroposophy, the New Age, the whole idea of a New Age. And she comes even before Vivekananda. She brings these Eastern mystical traditions to the West. And if you think about what it would be to be a woman, a single woman, traveling around, I mean, the middle of the 19th century, she was in Texas, she was in Tibet, she was in, wilderness areas and untamed areas. That sun opposite Jupiter, Uranus, just like nothing held her back. She's absolute, and the Jupiter is the world traveler,
Yeah.
But so, as you say, so free with the, she was fearless, but I think something to do with that Plutonic, both her personal power and probably dealing with, this is something we don't tend to focus on so much, but sort of the deep forces of nature and having some kind of access of being able to work with them. That's what they talk about
through the moon.
Esoteric, the moon opposite Pluto.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that.
Something I hadn't quite seen before, though, is, I'm very glad that you did bring it out, is how much her work, which is very detailed, like kind of Virgo Saturn, but Saturn Mercury, just how, it's almost like, as you say, bullet points and kind of organized, yeah. And she's into teaching, like the doctrine, and that's the Saturn Mercury, I think, coming through very much.
And hence the society.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, thank you very much for introducing her to all.
Great.